8:50 here on this Tuesday morning. Chris Graham with the Augusta Free Press and Virginia Sports Online. Our guest now to talk about Virginia sports and sports in general because, of course, the NCAA tournament is down to the Sweet 16. The Sweet 16 is coming up Thursday and Friday in the men's basketball tournament. We'll talk about the women's a little bit, but firstly, quick, I guess, Chris, the men's tournament, I was thinking about this, watching basketball on Sunday thinking, I don't know how far ago, maybe January, maybe February, maybe not that long ago, maybe just a few weeks, if you'd have told a Virginia Tech fan that you guys would be done playing and be bounced out of the NIT, whereas VCU and Richmond will still be playing in the Sweet 16 of the NCAA tournament, they probably would have looked at you like you were nuts.
No question, especially VCU. Now, Richmond, I think, Richmond fans had some illusion that at least that they would get an at-large bid. The fact that they got the A-10 conference automatic bid and still only got a 12 seed tells me they were probably on the outside looking in. But VCU was a team that finished fourth in the CAA and seemed to have faded down the stretch. They were 3-5 in their last 8 games, and even their own team, players on the team were talking about how they were, out to eat at sandwich shops and things like that during the Selection Sunday TV show on CBS. They weren't even gathered as a group to see if they were going to get a bid. They didn't think they were going to get a bid. They got a bid. They're in the Sweet 16. Richmond, of course, a couple of big wins, and they're in the Sweet 16. And Virginia Tech, yeah, they're out of the NIT. I know that we talk about, what kind of motivation can you keep playing in the NIT when you were supposed to be in the NCAA tournament. But Tech didn't do themselves well losing in the second round of Wichita State like they did at home. That doesn't make their case in retrospect any stronger that they should have had a NCAA bid.
Well, as you mentioned, motivation is so important. I mean, if the roles were reversed, if VCU had not gotten that bid and wound up in the NIT, it's possible they might have got bounced in the first round of the NIT, whereas if Tech had got that bid instead, who knows? It could be the Hokies in the Sweet 16. You never know.
You never know, yeah. And a team that Virginia Tech beat late in the season, of course, beat twice this season. Florida State is in the Sweet 16. They'll actually be playing VCU. And what an interesting way things work out. We have 5 teams with a 10 or higher seed that made the Sweet 16, and 3 of them are in the Southwest region. 2 of them are Richmond and VCU in that Southwest region. And if things work out a certain way, and it'll be hard for it to work out because Richmond has to play Kansas, the number 1 seed in that region, to get to this Final 8. But it could work out that VCU and Richmond play each other for a Final 4 spot in the finals of the Southwest region. You could have the city champion of Richmond also going to the Final 4. That'd be kind of interesting.
Yeah, I was thinking when you look at those 2 matchups, Virginia Commonwealth taking on Florida State, Richmond taking on Kansas, I have Kansas going all the way to the championship game and then winning it against Kentucky. At least from my standpoint, I'm thinking, boy, I'd much rather be playing Florida State, although you have to beat Kansas eventually.
Yeah, I guess I was on a radio show in Charlottesville last week, and I was asked to pick my Final 4, and I picked Richmond to go out of that region, so they're at least still alive and have a chance to do so. Kansas is a tough team. Kansas has those twins who are inside players that both are double guys, points and rebounds, and just are both tough guys to guard, and they have, of course.
And last I checked, Kansas was about a 10.5-point favorite.
Yeah, well, but favorites don't mean much this time of year. Florida State, in a way, they beat Notre Dame the other night. Notre Dame was a 2 seed that a lot of people talked about being a 1 seed, and Florida State handled that game. So, it's this time of year, it's about matchups. It's about who's hot on a particular night. You're not talking about having to beat a team, 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 7. You have to beat them once. And
Florida State's about a 4-point favorite over VCU, and a lot of people have talked about VCU and focused on VCU. Now, Florida State wasn't a bubble team per se, but they were much more than a bubble team. They were they were that much higher than a bubble team, and a lot of people have ignored how well the Seminoles have played so far in this tournament.
Yeah, they played really well. They looked really good, especially against Notre Dame. I mean, they took Notre Dame out of that game early, and really, they played like the 2 seed beating the 10 seed in that game. And Notre Dame was a team that had earned a 2 seed. And again, a lot of people are talking about maybe having played their way into a 1 seed. And what Florida State is showing, Leonard Hamilton's philosophy of he focuses on defense. He likes to recruit guys who are tall, athletic, long arms, who can make it hard to get the ball in the passing lane, who can steal the ball, who can block shots, and they make it really tough. Now they also have a tough time themselves. They don't score as much, but like they like to say, if we score 60, we know we're going to beat you because you're not going to score 60 on us. And Florida State is making that work so far in the NCAA tournament. And against a team like VCU, VCU is a team that likes to move the ball up and down the court. They have a
and Rodriguez is just amazing. I saw him against Purdue, and again, I know somebody else from Athlon Sports pointed this out on the show on Monday. I mean, it's not just that VCU has been winning against quality opponents in USC, Georgetown, and Purdue. They have just dominated all 3
and that's the thing. They've run these teams to death, and VCU's a veteran team. This is a team that has been there. They were part of the group that got recruited after Eric Mainer's buzzer-beating shot to beat Duke in the NCAA tournament a few years ago. This group came because of that. They came because they wanted to win basketball games in March at VCU, and they're
Can you compare this VCU team at all to the George Mason club from a few years ago?
In a way, I mean, I hate to say it. Of course, I remember this team better because it's now, but I think this team could be better than that team in a sense because of the way they could score the ball. That George Mason team beat you with defense and made you work hard on defense. And this VCU team plays good defense, but the way they can score the ball, they can score in bunches, and they can, but against Purdue the other night, for example, Purdue, midway through the first half, close game, tight game, and then, boom, I think it was a 24-6 run, and VCU pulled away, and really, Purdue didn't challenge in the second half of that game. It's because VCU can score points in bunches. It makes it really tough this time of year. That'll be an interesting matchup, VCU and Florida State, because of that, because they're two very different ball teams. Florida State, again, with their defense, and VCU with their offense. This game will go one of two ways. It'll either be that Florida State frustrates VCU into playing an ugly basketball game, and Florida State can win that game as a result, or that VCU runs up and down the court and makes Florida State play their game, and Florida State's not equipped to play that running game for 40 minutes, and that VCU can run away with it. So I don't think it's going to be it's not going to be a tight game, somewhere in between. It's going to be one extreme or the other. It's going to be either a low-scoring game or it's going to be, VCU maybe winning her out.
By the way, who do you like in the other two games coming up on Friday? Ohio State, Kentucky, and North Carolina taking on Marquette.
Carolina proves to, they're showing again to be vulnerable, continuing to, but they continue to win games. They pull that one out on over the weekend, that narrow win over Washington. But I guess it's a good thing, sometimes as a fan, you might say, gosh, we're winning all these close games. At some point, we're not going to win them anymore. But this time of year, there are going to be a lot of close games, and so you'd rather prove that you're tough and can win those kind of games. Against Marquette, Marquette's a team that's kind of like Florida State. In fact, one of the Florida State kids I saw after the game over against Notre Dame said that Marquette is the only team in the Big East that they think plays defense like anybody in the ACC does. The ACC is known these days for its string of tough defenses out there, and so that said, Carolina's used to playing against teams like a Marquette, and maybe that gives them an advantage. Ohio State, Kentucky is sort of one of those dream matchups. Kentucky has played well down the stretch. Of course, they had to replace a lot of guys from last year, so early season they had some stumbles, but this Kentucky team's playing pretty good basketball. And Ohio State, of course, wow, what they did to George Mason. I mean, that George Mason team's a pretty good basketball team, and Ohio State just ran them out of the gym, and that was very surprising. And so I think this Ohio State team really proved itself the other night. I mean, they were, of course, they come into the tournament as a national seed, number one, and number one in the region, of course, and they go out there and dismantle a really good George Mason team. That tells you where their heads are right now.
How about the West region coming up on Thursday now? A couple of games there. San Diego State taking on UConn. I believe UConn is a slight favorite, about a point and a half, and Duke against Arizona.
Duke-Arizona is another one of those kind of dream matchups just because of the name and marquee. And, of course, Arizona's playing well under Sean Miller, the former Xavier coach. They're finally recovering and playing. They had a few years where they weren't playing Arizona basketball, and they're back. And I think that their Sweet 16 this year proves it. Duke.
Although they just escaped Texas, and I'm not sure if there was enough time left on the clock, but I got from Texas at the very end. If there was time left on the clock, it was less than a second. Got the rebound, got hammered. There was no call now. Whether the referee said, I'm not calling a foul there, or whether he looked at the clock and said there's no time left, I'm not sure. But had there been time left and had a foul call been made, a couple of foul shots, maybe it's Duke and Texas.
Yeah, maybe it is. Arizona, Arizona, I give them credit for doing what they did. I mean, it's a tough situation, just like the Butler-Pitt game. It comes down to that last play, and of course, to beat a Texas team who, as a 4 seed, Texas a few weeks ago was number 1 in the country. So Texas is Texas kind of stumbled last year at the end of the season too. So they have Rick Barnes has that issue with the March swoon at this point. But Duke themselves, I didn't get to see the Duke game on Sunday because I was watching college baseball. But following the scores on my Droid, I was keeping up, and Duke was comfortably ahead in the second half, and I actually stopped watching keeping up with theirs and focused on some other games. And I looked up, and they won by 2 points and followed up afterwards, and Michigan made a late run. And, maybe that's a good thing again, just like I talked about Carolina having to win a close game. in tournament time, you want to be battle tested. You don't want to lose the game, obviously, because you're out one and done situation. But Duke got some battle testing the other night from Michigan, and maybe that gets them more ready for Arizona.
San Diego State, UConn, if Duke can clear Arizona, they'll get the winner of that game. And, boy, that one is a really hard game to pick. San Diego State is very athletic and underappreciated, underrated, I think, still, even though despite their number 2 seed in UConn, boy, they just roll through the Big East tournament, and they just keep rolling in the NCAA tournament. I don't know if you can ask for a hotter ball club than UConn.
Well, and they're a hot ball club now, and early in the season, remember, they started off pretty hot then, too. I'm not sure if they were even ranked in the preseason this year, and then they ran off a string of victories at the start of the season. And just like everybody else who goes in conference play in a power conference, they had a tough stretch in the Big East and, kind of lost their high national rankings. They fell back into the teens and 20s. But this is a team that's proven a couple different times this year that they're an elite basketball team, and they're there again. And my concern going into the tournament for them was that they had played 5 games in 5 days to win the Big East tournament, and that they might not have any legs left over. Maybe they win their first round game, but the second round game, the 7th game basically in a week and a half would be kind of tough on them. But they've gotten through that now, and they've got a few days to get their legs back under them, and now they get to go in full strength, in my opinion, against the San Diego State team, which I agree with you. They're underrated even as a number 2 seed. This is a team that, in any other resume for any other team in the country, a power conference team would have had a number 1 seed, and I think they like to carry that chip on their shoulder as much as you can carry a chip on your shoulder being a number 2 seed. And so,
well, I'll tell you something right there. A number 2 seed taking on UConn, and UConn's the favorite.
UConn's as well. That shows again maybe the lack of respect for this. But if San Diego State plays out west, we don't. Those of us in the East and predominantly most people in media and otherwise live in the East, and we haven't seen them play that much. We saw them play BYU a couple times, and that's about what we know about them. And so they're looking forward to people watching them, and they get the primetime game on Thursday night. So they're looking forward to seeing or having people see them and show what they can do against a UConn team that we all know. We know what UConn brings.
I wonder how many Big East experts would have said before the tournament started, there will be 2 of 11 left in the Sweet 16. Most folks would have said, Pitt, Notre Dame, or Notre Dame, Syracuse, or whatever. They probably would not have said Connecticut and Marquette.
No, they wouldn't have said Marquette, because Marquette was a surprise, in my opinion, to get in with the 14 losses they had. They were one of those teams that I felt was controversial to get a seed at all. And yeah, UConn, the way they played in the Big East tournament, certainly they're hot right now. But the fact that there's 2 only is the surprise to me and a lot of people. I mean, look at it. The city of Richmond has 2, and the whole Big East has 2, and the city of Richmond's only got 2 Division I basketball teams. So, it is a surprise. But I think also, and of course, the ACC, which only had 4 teams in the tournament, had a couple teams famously left out. Gets 3 teams in the Sweet 16, the most of any conference. So I think what this says is, perhaps, and this is what Florida State was talking about after that game the other night, perhaps the Big East isn't as good as people say. I mean, they go up there, they beat each other up, and, the cachet, and they're on national TV a lot because of the ESPN contract and that kind of thing. But, they proved this time they were 9-9 in the NCAA tournament. They only got 2 teams through. Maybe their basketball up there is not as good as the national folks like to think they are.
How about the last region? The game's also played on Thursday. Florida taking on Fredette and BYU. Interesting matchup there. Any matchup that involves trying to shut down a player like Fredette is going to be an interesting matchup. And then Wisconsin and Butler. Wisconsin keeps rolling along. Butler just keeps finding a way to win. I mean, that victory over Pittsburgh was simply amazing. And I'm still baffled by why the guy from Pittsburgh tried to go for the back, trying to get a rebound with less than a second on the clock. I mean, even if you get the rebound and the referee doesn't call the foul, there's not enough time to do anything with the ball. That's
right. Well, and both fouls in that game situation were interesting, and maybe the two of the stupider fouls in NCAA tournament history, because Butler's up 1, and then they foul a guy at half court with 1.4 seconds to go, and then there's that foul there. Butler is a team, of course. I mean, don't forget they were the national runners-up last year, and had a prayer shot at the end that just rimmed out that would have won them the national championship. Now they lost Gordon Hayward, their best player from that team, but this is a team that has won NCAA tournament games consistently in the last few years. It's a really interesting matchup with Wisconsin. I mean, those are 2 teams that to me are very similar in their makeup and their approach to basketball. This should be a really good game, because I don't see this game being one of those games with a lot of runs. It's going to be just a tight game from opening tip to the final buzzer. And, I don't know that, of course, at this point, seedings don't really matter anyway. I think this is a very even matchup, and I think either of these teams could get through. The other matchup in that region, BYU and Florida, They're also similar teams in the sense that they both, can score points. Florida plays a little bit better defense than BYU, and Jimmer Fredette, I'm still worried about a team like BYU with a guy like Jimmer Fredette. He scored 30 in both of his games in the NCAA tournament this year so far, but a team that relies on one guy to score as many points as he has to for that team to win can be vulnerable at this stage against a team like Florida.
When you can shoot that far behind the three-point line.
Well, it doesn't take much. I mean, I know a guy like him. He's also going to keep shooting it because he's so confident that eventually they're going to start going in. But that can also hurt you. It can get you into an early hole if your guy isn't on early and he needs to keep shooting to kind of get into his rhythm. Whereas Florida's got a bunch of guys who can score, and they've also got a few guys who can play defense, and they can run different guys at him at different points in the game to give him different looks, to keep their guys rested playing him. I mean, it's easy to say. That's what you got to do to beat BYU is stop Jimmer Fredette. Easy to say that, hard to do, of course.
So recent things. Do you want to make any changes? What's your final four right now?
Well, I'm going to still stick with Richmond just because I stuck with them, in the Southwest. I mean, no reason to change that now. I'll stick with them, but what an interesting bracket that's turned out to be, to say the least. Let's see, going down the list real quick, in the West, I'm going to stick with Duke. I had Duke earlier, and I'm going to stick with them. I like them in that bracket. And then, let's see, in the East, in the East, I'll stick with Ohio State. North Carolina is still playing too close to call games for me to like them so much there. And then in the Southeast, I am going to change here. I'll go with Butler. I think Butler's got the pedigree to get back to the Final Four, and I think I like Butler to go through that bracket.
Well, it's probably not going to happen. Can you imagine in Vegas before the tournament picking your Final Four as let's say, Butler, UConn, or San Diego State, I guess, for that matter, and then maybe Marquette and VCU?
I've got 2 1s there. If I've got Ohio State and Duke, and then I've got Butler at 8, and then Richmond at 12. So,
well, a lot of people, including me, are salivating over an Ohio State-Duke semifinal matchup in the Final Four.
Yeah, and that would, because and this Duke team, of course, getting Kylie Irving back, which was a surprise and not a surprise. He'd been seen before games late in the regular season out there warming up and looking better at each time he went out, at least shooting and participating in shoot-arounds and things like that. So a lot of teams going into the tournament lost their best player. Georgetown was one, Villanova was one. Got teams that lost their best player and kind of limped into the NCAA tournament. Duke gets a number 1 seed and gets their best player back. I think a Duke-Ohio State matchup, especially as Kylie Irving continues to get into playing shape and playing condition, in the national semifinals could be just kind of like that Duke UNLV game from about 20 years ago or so. It'd be one of those type matchups, one of those two heavyweight boxers in there slugging it out, and let's see who wins at the end.
Really quick, college baseball update. You had a chance to check out the Cavaliers last weekend?
Yeah, I was over at Davenport Field for all 3 games with Florida State, and the Cavs took 2 of the 3 to improve in the national rankings now. They're number 3 in the country as of this week's national rankings. All 3 national polls have the Cavs at number 3. And all 3 one-run games, so you can see that those 2 teams were evenly matched. And great baseball. I mean, Virginia wins, and actually all 3 games also went to extra innings. Virginia won in 11 innings both on Friday and Saturday, and then Florida State won in 10 innings on Sunday. And it's good to see. I mean, I think these 2 teams already in March are ready for the NCAA tournament in June, because the way especially Mike Martin, the Florida State coach, was managing his pitching changes. He used six pitchers in 2 of the games. He was playing like it was a playoff series, and I think what you could see there was both coaches were trying to get a feel for where their teams are as far as their preparations for this, because these are 2 teams that are going to host regionals. They're probably going to host super regionals if they get through the regional bracket, and they're both looking forward to, or looking towards building towards a College World Series appearance, and it's probably a good test for both teams, and both teams passed the test in my opinion. Even though Virginia won 2 of the 3 games, I think those 2 teams are very evenly matched, and I look forward to seeing them both play late into June.
So Chris, what do we look for the coming days from the Augusta Free Press and Virginia Sports Online?
Well, we'll get ready for some more college baseball, and then of course college basketball. The focus on the 2 Virginia teams still left in the Sweet 16, and the outside chance that they could be playing for a Final Four berth if both can win on the Thursday night. So looking forward to just keeping people abreast of what's going on with that. And again, college baseball, some lacrosse, and we're in the heart of lacrosse season as well. So a lot to keep up with.
Yeah, I guess when we look ahead, we're only a few weeks away from the NFL draft.
that's right. And, I was out there this weekend, of course, again with Florida State and Virginia, and was game-winning home run hit on Saturday by Virginia was hit by Jared King, a guy who played for the Generals. He hit the game-winning home run for Virginia in the 11th inning. Winning pitcher on Friday night was Justin Thompson, pitched for the Generals last year. He pitched 4 innings in relief and got the win on Friday night. And I like to say scouting some of our kids. We have 4 kids coming in from UVA to the Generals for 2011, and so I was watching those kids. And I say we because, of course, listeners who may remember, I'm the general manager of the Waynesboro Generals team, so I get to have some fun in the summertime with actually tinkering with baseball a little bit on a hands-on basis. So yeah, and then Sherman Johnson, a kid for Florida State, their number 3 hitter, actually played for Covington last year. So yeah, already thinking about baseball this summer. It's not that far away.
Okay, Chris Graham with the Augusta Free Press and Virginia Sports Online right there, talking, of course, for Virginia sports and sports in general with the NCAA tournament and a little college baseball as well. We'll come back for more of Online again here on the Tuesday Classic Country, AM 1450, right after this.